Good morning, everybody. I know it's a rainy Friday morning, but I think we can do better than that. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for being here today. My name is Alicia Murphy, and I am one of the Associate Executive Directors at Citizens Committee for Children. I'm giving myself a promotion as I stand here. My job today is just to welcome you here and introduce our Executive Director, Jennifer March, who is going to just give a warm welcome and thank you to everybody for being here today.
Thanks so much. Before I get started, I just want to shout out to the CCC team, Carlos, Laura, Robert, Sophie, and Alicia. Thank you so much, and thanks everyone else on the CCC team for rising early to get this pulled together this morning. So I'm Jennifer March. I want to thank you all for being here today on a rainy Friday morning about a really important topic. We know we must do everything we can to ensure the well-being of New York City's children, and that includes ensuring that all of our children and their families are counted in the 2020 census. Thank you to New York Counts 2020, our partner in this forum, and to the panelists and breakout facilitators whom you'll meet shortly and you can read about in your program. Of course, many thanks to our keynote speaker, Julie Menon from New York City Census, who I'll introduce in a moment. I'd also like to thank President Jennifer Robb and her staff at Hunter College for hosting us this morning at Roosevelt House. As some of you might already know, CCC was founded in 1944 by a group of individuals that included Eleanor Roosevelt, who believed that every New Yorker had a role to play in making our city a better place for all children. And for over 7 decades now, CCC continues to work with New Yorkers, including child-serving professionals, government staff, philanthropists, elected officials, and everyday people to partner with us in our efforts to ensure that every child is healthy, housed, educated, and safe. And we've created the largest municipal data set in the country, and it relies heavily on census data as a tool for advocacy. To leverage the facts about children and families, and to draw on our analysis of legislation, programs, and budget proposals to advocate in Albany and City Hall, as well as weigh in on proposals put forward in Washington, D.C. So Roosevelt House is a really fitting place for us to gather today and to mobilize to ensure that all children are counted in the 2020 census. Today, you'll hear from individuals and organizations that can point you to tools, resources, and messaging strategies to take back to your organizations for census outreach. And as you listen to our speakers today, I encourage you to keep in mind the facts that drive our efforts to focus intentionally and consistently on engaging youth and families in the 2020 census. In 2010, there was a net undercount of over 1 million children nationwide, and that trend has progressively worsened since 1980. New York has experienced a loss of federal representation as the result of the last several census counts, including the loss of 2 congressional seats in 2010 and the potential to lose 2 more in 2020. This means fewer people who will advocate for New York City's children and families in Congress. And when children are undercounted in the census, New York loses resources that helps ensure that all children have access to food and income supports, health insurance, educational opportunities, and so much more. Historically, children have not been undercounted at the same rate. While nationally there was a 4.6 net undercount of all young children, there was a 6.6% net undercount of young Black children and a 7.5% net undercount of young Latino children. Immigrant communities and low-income communities are also at great risk of an undercount, making some areas of New York City the hardest to count in the nation. And this year, our challenge, of course, is greater for many, many reasons. A climate of fear and mistrust of government among immigrant families, concerns over data privacy, the first ever digital census, and general confusion about how to tally young children in complex households will be barriers in many of our communities. While our challenge in 2020 is great, together we can and will make a difference. We are here to help equip all of you as trusted messengers to conduct outreach in the communities that you serve in order to address the barriers to participation in the census, Together, we can help support the well-being of children and families, and particularly children and families of color, immigrants, and those living in low-income communities by ensuring that families accurately fill out forms for the 2020 census. Following our keynote, there will be a panel discussion here in the auditorium, so I'd ask you to stay seated. And our moderator is Meta Anand from Census 2020, the Senior Fellow at the New York Immigration Coalition, and she's going to be joined by Jeff Baylor from the Census Bureau, Allison Turek from the New York City Census 2020, Sophia Halketitis, CCC's own, Chuck Park from Mequon Center for Community Action, and Jorge Vasquez from Latino Justice. And now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker, Julie Menon. She serves as the director of the She serves as the director of the New York City Census 2020 and as executive assistant corporate counsel at the New York City Law Department. In her current role as the New York City Census Director, she's responsible for ensuring that New York City receives its fair share of over hundreds of billions of dollars in federal funding allocated nationwide, as well as fighting attempts to undercount the immigrant community. She's led 3 New York City agencies in the past, including the Commissioner of the Department of Consumer Affairs and the Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment. Among her many accomplishments, she led the implementation of paid sick leave as Commissioner of the Department of Consumer Affairs and launched new programs to increase women's representation and opportunities in film, TV, theater, and the music industry at the Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment. She also served 7 years as the chair of Manhattan Community Board 1 and is widely credited with helping to lead Lower Manhattan's resurgence after 9/11. Several weeks after 9/11, she founded the not-for-profit Wall Street Rising, which focused on rebuilding Lower Manhattan and developed itself into an organization of over 30,000 members. Clearly, Julie is no stranger to the importance of community-driven mobilization efforts, and she brings that with her in her role as managing New York City's efforts for a complete count, and overseeing the Get Out the Count efforts in communities and ensuring that all city agencies are leveraged to promote census participation. So we're so happy she's here. Welcome, Julie.
Thank you, Jennifer, for that incredibly kind introduction. And I really want to thank Jennifer and CCC for the incredible work that you are constantly doing to represent the interests of children. We worked together in the past when I was at DCA, and I really want to thank you for everything you and CCC are doing. And it's really great to be here. So I am going to walk through a presentation. I just want to make sure it's loaded. Thank you so much. Thank you. And just while we're doing that, I also want to thank Jeff Baylor, who you're going to be hearing from the Federal Census Bureau. Jeff, as you know, is a regional director of all of the various regions in the tri-state, and we really so appreciate his partnership. He and his team, thank you, have been absolutely terrific partners as we make sure to get every single New Yorker counted. Okay, so I'm going to walk right into this. What's at stake? I am always amazed by the fact that when I talk to people about the census, a lot of people still say to me, why does this matter? This sounds like some boring government form. Why should we be bothered? Why should we do this? So I'm really here to tell you why the census matters and why it's not an overstatement to say that it is honestly one of the most important issues that is affecting the city's future. And the reason why is severalfold. First of all, we're fighting for our fair share of over $650 billion that the federal government allocates each and every year nationwide for over 300 programs. So obviously for an organization like CCC that is really focused on making sure that children get the resources that they so sorely need, this is really what's at stake. It's public education. The city of New York, for example, derives $1.5 billion in funding every year in terms of public education. So if you even want to break down those numbers, $770 million for Title I funds, $87 million a year in Head Start funding. But it's also so many other programs, public housing, Medicaid, senior centers, infrastructure. All these different programs depend on getting every New Yorker counted. If people don't fill the census out, all that means is we get less of the resources that are really owed to our city. It's also about political representation. So in an undercount, New York State stands to lose 2 congressional seats. Just to put that into historical perspective, originally at its height, the New York State congressional delegation had 45 members. Now we have 27. We would go down to 25. So that's really, again, about power and representation, and our voice is at stake as well. So how did we do in 2010? Abysmally. We did terribly. So for those of you, like I'm a mother, for those of you that are parents and your child brings home a grade of 61.9%, that's how the city did in 2010. 61.9% of New Yorkers self-responded to the census. The national average is 76%. And parts of our city fared even worse. Brooklyn as a whole, 55.5%. Parts of Brooklyn were in the 30s and 40s. So this is terrible. Like, we cannot have that again. And it's not as if 2010 was some kind of outlier. We did just as poorly in 2000 as well. So we can and we must do better. Now, in terms of children in particular, children under 5 are the #1 undercounted population across the United States in a census. So in 2010, nearly 1 million children were left out of the census. They were literally invisible. They were never counted. And so if you want to put that in real world context, what does that mean? So that child that was under 5, that was undercounted in 2010, and then enters kindergarten without being counted, without getting the resources that they deserve, it is not until they're a sophomore in high school that they have the opportunity to be counted again. So they have lost resources across the board for 10 years. So literally, that's why I say that this is honestly the most important issue that is affecting the city's future. So what are our goals? Our goals in creating this Office of the Census, and let me just say that this is the first time that the city has engaged in this type of work. So the mayor created this office, asked me to run this back in January. And again, this is really uncharted, unprecedented territory for the city, but we feel we absolutely have to do this. Our goal is to really close the gap between New York City's abysmal self-response rate, which I talked about before, the 61.9%, and the 76% that's a national average. I mean, let's be clear, this is a national competition. We're in competition with every other jurisdiction. So to the extent that New Yorkers don't fill it out, all that means is other states get our money. That's really what's happening. Okay, so let me talk about the timeline in case you're not familiar with that. The census kicks off nationwide on March 12th. So on March 12th, that is when the Federal Census Bureau is sending out mailings to everyone all across the United States. The great news about the 2020 census is there are new ways to fill the census out. So for the first time, you can fill it out online. This is super cool, okay? I'm very excited about this because basically what this means is that in any meeting that CCC has, Jennifer can make an announcement and say, has everyone filled the census out? If not, let's take out our phones. And in 2 minutes, you're done. It's 10 simple questions, you are done. So we want organizations all across the city to do that. So to the extent that you all are members of other organizations, please make that announcement starting March 12th at the top of every single meeting. If you're a member of a house of worship, please ask your faith-based leader to make that announcement. It's so important. If you don't fill the census out on that first mailing, you will receive additional mailings that I'm sure Jeff will talk about during the panel discussion. However, if you don't fill it out after the final mailing, which occurs in late April, the federal government will come and knock on your door. We view that as a total failure, and we view that as a total failure because New Yorkers should be self-responding. It should not take the federal government having to send someone to knock on your door. And honestly, in this climate, people are not going to answer the door for a stranger. So again, please, the message we want to impart to everyone is just self-respond. Just answer the census, the first interaction you get from the Federal Census Bureau. And then the census wraps up in July, and then the information is sent to Washington. Okay, I mentioned the online. The other thing that is that you can also answer the census by phone for the first time. So there'll be a 1-800 number that people will be able to call. This is great as well because it, again, allows for many different ways that you can answer the census. Now, all the time I get questions like, well, who fills the census out and how do we know? And so the census isn't going to a particular individual in the home. It's going directly to the address. So the head of the household, any member of the household can fill that form out. So we want to make sure that people know that as well. And oftentimes I'm asked, well, like who, let me just take a step back about what's on the form. It's 10 questions. It's your name, your address, do you rent or own your home, your age, your gender, race, ethnicity, who's living in the home. All the time I'm asked about the who's living in the home question. So the way that I like to think about the census is it's almost like a photograph of the home. It's a snapshot in time at the moment you're filling the census out. You have a friend sleeping on the couch. At that time, you got to put them in the census. You've got a child living at home, you got to put them in the census. So that's really, really important that everyone impart that information as well. The citizenship question. So there is so much news about the citizenship question. I also have a senior role at the city law department. We were plaintiff on that case. We won that case along with our coalition, fair and square at the Supreme Court. That's the great news. So the citizenship question is off. The really bad news is President Trump continues to tweet about it, suggesting that the question's on. It's not. So we really need your help making sure that everyone knows that that question is indeed off the census. In addition, a lot of other misconceptions I hear is people say, well, I'm not going to fill the form out because it asks my social security number or it asks my income. It does not ask any of that information. So please, we also want to make sure that people understand that as well. And then privacy. By law, the census cannot share your information with anyone else. So again, a common question that we receive is people say, we have an illegal basement, or we don't want people to know how many people are living in our home. But no one's going to find that out. That information is completely protected by Title 13 of the U.S. Code, and it in fact imposes up to 5-year prison sentence, up to $250,000 fine on any federal census employee who shares that information, and that's a lifetime ban. So I mentioned this already, Title 13 of the code, so I will skip through that. Okay, so what is New York City doing? I mentioned we've got this unprecedented effort that we're doing, and it really falls into a number of different areas. We have a complete count fund. So we basically disseminated $19 million to community organizations on the ground that are our partners in this endeavor, because we know that it's community organizations that are the trusted voice in their neighborhoods. So that is why we wanted to make sure we were partnering with them. We also have on-the-ground organizing. So we have a field program. Our field program is basically, we divided New York City into 245 neighborhoods, and we created something called a Neighborhood Organizing Census Committee, NOCCS, or KNOCS, like knock on the door. This is a great way to volunteer. So for any of you that want to join one of your local neighborhood organizing committees that we are, just to be clear, the city, our office is running, we really need your help. We've got thousands of people that have volunteered. We need many, many more. Our website is nyc.gov/census. Please volunteer. You can literally volunteer from home. It couldn't be easier. Volunteering basically means we give you phone lists to call your neighbors, to text your neighbors, because that neighbor-to-neighbor contact is so incredibly important. And then, I'm going to talk about this, we also have a media campaign as well that I'll talk about. So I mentioned our complete fund. So we, again, the Complete Count Fund is really across the board, focusing in areas that had low self-response rates. So if you look at this, the map on your left basically shows a 2020 self-response rates if we did nothing. Like if the city of New York didn't do anything and we didn't have any organizing at all, where we think we might be. And you can see that some of those neighborhoods would be in the 20 and 30s. Then you see the map on the right, the map in blue, is where we're funding. And that's, I think, really important to note that we're funding particularly in hard to count areas. Okay, I mentioned our neighborhood organizing census committee. So again, it's like a group of neighbors that's getting together to help organize their community, working with our office. We really, really need your help. And so again, website nyc.gov/census is the best way to volunteer. We're also doing Days of Action. That's another way you can help. We're doing Teach-In Tuesday next week, where we're having teach-ins all over the city. We're going to do a text-a-thon in mid-March. Love to have your help on the text-a-thon. And then in April, we'll be doing rallies all over the city. So many people say to me, well, how does this neighborhood organizing census committee work? There's so many ways that you can volunteer. I mentioned teach-ins. We do teach-ins where we train people in how to organize and talk about the census. Community canvassing, as I mentioned, it's literally calling friends and neighbors. We give you the lists and help you to do that. Peer-to-peer texting. There's so many ways to volunteer. Partnerships. So in a city like New York, where we have to reach over 8.5 million people, it's challenging at best. So we're working with all of our city agencies. We're working with our faith leaders and houses of worship. We're working with the private sector, with businesses, elected officials, and labor as well. We're also partnering with the libraries. So there are 219 public library branches. We gave a grant to the public library system. We're taking 110 of those in central locations and really making sure that they have dedicated census staff, that they have computer terminals. So for those New Yorkers that lack access to broadband, they'll be able to come into one of these branches and fill the census out. Oftentimes I'm asked, well, what are you doing with the Department of Ed? We have a terrific collaboration with DOE, obviously working with the Chancellor to help spread the news, but also doing flyers and backpacks. We'll be doing that 3 different times, making sure, again, that all parents know about the census. We're also working directly in the schools. We're also going to work with the CECs, with the PTAs, across the board, across the city. And that's it. And then I don't know if you want me taking questions or not. I'll take a few questions then. Jennifer said yes, so I will take some. Yes.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Will your actions with the Department of Education include outreach to Head Start, and will you also be collaborating with ACS, Administration for Children's
Yes.
Services, on child care?
100%. I mean, one of the great things about this being a city organized initiative from city government is that we're able to partner with all of our sister agencies, every single one. So ACS, DOE, absolutely. And you'll really start to see that. We've already started in the schools, but you'll start to see even more mobilization in the schools, as we're now heading into the count. So yes, we are. The one thing I didn't mention that I just realized is not in this presentation, but I want to make sure everyone knows as well, is our marketing and advertising campaign. So you will start to see our ads in late February. We judiciously held our money to have an onslaught come February. I really hope you will not be able to walk down any city street and not be bombarded in many ways with our advertising. So we're advertising on TV, on radio, digital, and print. We're spending $8 million on our advertising campaign, which is really an unprecedented number for the city of New York. Of that $8 million, $3 million will be a community and ethnic media, which is the largest investment in community and ethnic media the city of New York has ever made on any campaign. Yes, in the back. Yes, we are. And I'm sure Jeff will talk about this as well. We are partnering with DHS. So let me talk a little bit about what we're doing, particularly around the homeless, because this is incredibly important that we get everyone counted. So I'm sure Jeff will talk about it. But again, it's the Federal Census Bureau that does the count, not the city of New York. But we're partnering very closely with them. And there are 3 days in the spring where there'll be a count of the homeless that are on the streets. And then Jeff and his team are working very closely with DHS on the actual shelters themselves, because they'll be working with the administrator of their shelter to make sure that every single person is counted.
So I'm sorry for interrupting, but I'm just going to ask us if we can move on
Okay.
to the panel. There will be more opportunities to ask questions afterwards. We'll pass out cards during the panel where you can write down your questions, and then members of both the U.S. Census Bureau and New York City Census 2020 team are here to answer your questions after the panel and during the networking portion.
And Allison from my team is going to be on the panel, so you can pepper her with all sorts of questions you might have about what we're doing. So thank you so much for having me today.
So thank you again, Julie, for providing a very great comprehensive overview of census work happening in New York City and what the New York City team is doing to ensure everyone is counted. Like said during the presentation, this is going to take collaboration and partnership and leadership amongst all of us in the room and across New York City. And I'm happy to say that we have a great set of leaders coming up to speak. Right now, during our panel representing different organizations, the Census Bureau, and institutions, both here in the city and federally. So I'll ask now that Mita and our panel speakers come up and take their seats. Let me put up the slide right here to show you where you'll be sitting, and we'll get started. Yes. There you go. So if Mita, followed by Jeff, then Sophia, Chuck, Allison, and Jorge. And just make sure that your mics are on. I believe they were turned off, just to save battery.
Good morning, everyone. Nope, not on. Good morning, everyone. Okay. So before I get started on actually moderating the panel, I'm going to take moderator's privilege or mic privilege and do something that hasn't been done yet today, which is designate all of you to be census mentors. I normally say ambassadors. I picked a different word for this crew. So census mentors, so by being here, you are pledging to fill out the census yourself, and you are pledging that you are going to get your friends, neighbors, coworkers, family to fill out the census, because I think a theme we're all going to hear is that it's going to take every single one of us, because it's a great big city and we really want to get everyone counted. So thank you for allowing me that privilege, and congratulations on your new role. Okay, so we're going to start by having each panelist introduce themselves, but I will also be asking them a question to fold into their introduction of themselves. So, Jeff, let's start with you. And in addition to telling us about yourself, can you tell us what the real-life impact towards communities and neighborhoods are when children are not counted?
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone. An honor to be here. Thank you to Carlos. Thank you to Jennifer. It was great to see Julie. She's an amazing. The work that the New York City office is doing is truly unprecedented, and their partnership with us at the federal level is second to none. It's been fantastic, and we continue to build off of that. So, again, I'm Jeff Baylor, Director for the New York region of the U.S. Census Bureau. It's one of 6 regions we have across the country. We cover all of New York, New Jersey, all the New England states, and Puerto Rico. That's our territory, and we need help. That's a pretty big. So before I answer, or part of the answer to the question that Mita brought up, is the census messaging. And now that you're all census mentors, we need you to start the conversation about the census. And that goes, the census is safe, the census is easy, and the census is important. And one thing you have to do today, if you haven't yet, is meet Jolie Golden. She's up at the census table. She is your direct resource. I'm telling you, she doesn't sleep. She works 30 hours a day just on providing support to partners. She is fantastic. She can get you tools, materials for waiting rooms, posters for rooms that anything you need. Please don't hesitate to reach out to Jolie. She is your direct resource. So again, that conversation, the census is safe, and Julie mentioned this. Every piece of data is protected under federal law, Title 13. Local, state, federal law enforcement can never access our data at any time for any reason. Homeland Security and ICE, never at any time for any reason. The Patriot Act doesn't even supersede Title 13. This law has been in place since 1954. It has never been breached. We have never released information at a person or household level, because by law we can't. The census is easy. You saw the 4 ways to respond. We're really excited about that. And I want to point out, as Julie mentioned, self-response is key. It's the highest quality data we ever get at the lowest possible cost. Because when we do start knocking on doors, and even though it is the federal government knocking on doors, it's going to be your neighbors. We're hiring people in every community. We have to. They have to speak the language. They have to understand the culture. They need to know what the challenges are. So we're still recruiting $28 an hour at 2020census.gov/jobs. You can apply while you're here, while I'm talking, but not while they're talking. Please listen to what they say. So a lot of different ways, again, short form only census, and then the imports, and really get to what Mina had asked. You think about the representation that was mentioned earlier by Julie, and the funding, the $675 billion of federal funding that's disseminated every year. Special education, free and reduced lunch programs, class sizes, the technology in our classrooms, teacher training, after-school programs, Head Start, playground and public parks, mass transportation, public transportation to get students to and from school. All those are based upon an accurate census. And I was at a meeting with the community board president in the Bronx, and I'll close my intro out with this. She talked about an undercount, and this is how she explained it, and I think it's just so powerful. She talked about a school of 100 kids. Just imagine you have a school of 100 kids in your community, and let's say in 2020, only 80 of those kids get counted. For the next 10 years, that school is going to get 80% of the funding it deserves for all those programs I just mentioned, whether it's Title I, whether it's special ed, whether it's Head Start or playground and public parks. And it doesn't just affect those 20 kids who weren't counted. It affects all 100. So that's why we're asking people, it's not enough just to pledge to fill out your form. Pledge to start the conversation, to educate your community members, because you are the trusted voices. And we need your help in ensuring we get the most complete and accurate census. Thank you.
I think that leads really nicely into the question I have for Sophia. And Sophia, if you could introduce yourself, but also let us know why service providers should really be mobilizing around GOTC and specifically around GOTC for children. Oh, and sorry, I'm speaking the lingo. GOTC is get out the count, just like GOTV.
Good morning, everybody. So my name is Sophia. I'm from CCC, Citizens Committee for Children. And, I'm going to get into Mita's question, why should service providers, prioritize, mobilize, and get out the count efforts for children? But before that, I'm going to kind of take a step back and reiterate some of the things that Jeff and Julie were saying earlier. In 2010, New York's self-response rate was 62%, again, compared to that national average of about 76%. And the last census, it was like that as well. For the past two censuses, thank you very much. For the past two censuses, less than 2/3 of New Yorkers have responded to the form themselves, right? And as a result of that and the error that's introduced, and Jeff kind of got to this, the error that's introduced when people don't respond to the census themselves, we lost 2 of the 435 congressional seats. And just to kind of contextualize the 27 that New York has now, as Julie mentioned, down from 45, Texas has, more seats than us at 36, a huge state. California has 53 seats, as well as Florida having 27 seats, same as New York. And so when it comes to children, children are missed on their form more than people of any other age group, as was mentioned. And while the count of adults has gotten better and better over censuses, the count of young children has gotten worse and worse. And just an even more step back from that is, how do we know that? Is because we have birth records, we have death records for young children, and we use a net migration estimate to try and figure out what's the real number of children living in a place. And the implications of an undercount have consequences I think everybody in here is familiar with, right? Loss of federal funding, seats in Congress, the ability to have accurate data and to use it for community planning of schools and for medical facilities, et cetera. But this is really important for all of us, service providers, families, and communities, and we should prioritize get out the count efforts because our ability to do so is directly related to those resources. The end goal in everyone's mind should be 100% self-response rate because people's efforts matter. All of our efforts in this room make a difference in getting a complete count. And it matters for 10 years, which is most of a young child's childhood, right? A child who is 2 now, in 10 years will be 12. That's a totally different set of resources that could have been used over that 10-year period. And just, if I can have one more minute of time to kind of drive this example home of people's efforts matter and why it matters that everybody here in this room is here today and, starting that conversation, is the example of, Washington Heights. Many folks might have heard of this example. And basically, in 2010, Washington Heights boasted the highest response rate in the nation, and the highest in Manhattan, rather, the highest in one of the highest in the nation at 75%. And this was part of a very, very concerted effort of community members to see that Dominican immigrants and other Hispanic immigrants were being counted in their census. And quoted from the article from the city, somebody said, we have the bodegas, we have the salons, we have the after schools, we have the hospitals. Everywhere you went during the week, someone was putting the census right in front of you. The messaging has to be visible, we have to be active, seen, and counted. I'll leave it at that.
So, Chuck, what reasons do you see that children are not being counted in the communities that Minkwon works in?
Sure. Chuck Park. I'm with the Minkwon Center for Community Action. For those of you who don't know, we serve low-income, low English proficiency community members in Flushing. So that's the end of the 7 train, one stop past Citi Field in the U.S. Open. I encourage you to visit sometime. We've got amazing food, amazing community. But that is the community we operate in. And we were talking a little bit before this panel, and I think we agreed that there is one big secret to reaching immigrant communities. There's one big secret. I'll tell you all, so it's not a secret anymore. The big secret is that we are just like you, okay? You know, we buy our parents buy our diapers and food at grocery stores or Duane Reade. You know, we buy children's Tylenol there. We look at our smartphones over the dinner table. We do everything that everybody else does, okay? So the first challenge then to reach our communities and reach children in our communities is overcoming our own assumptions as outreach workers that there's some invisible wall that stops me from starting a conversation with someone who looks different from me or maybe talks with their friends in a different language. So we need to start with just, a greeting and a baseline goodwill. Just try having that conversation. Try saying hi. Have you heard about the census? Say it in English. Say it in another language if you can, but say it in English if you can't. And start there. So I'll just leave it at that for now.
Allison. Allison, we've heard several people talk about the self-response rate, including your boss. And can you sort of give us a bit more color as to the importance of the self-response rate versus the greater response rate?
Sure. Thank you, Mita. And thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, all of CCC. I'm thrilled to be here. I'm sure you all were inspired and enjoyed hearing from Julie, and I hope to provide just a little bit more detail and color to what she shared earlier, in addition to what all my amazing colleagues, I feel like there's not much for me to say because these three have already said so much, and I'm sure you're going to add to it, but I'll do my best. So as Mita said, my name is Allison Grant-Tarek. I am the Grants Director at NYC Census 2020, which means that my team and I are responsible for $19 million of funding, 16 million of which went directly to 157 nonprofits across the city, including Minkwon, and including many of you here today, Daycare Council and others that are here. I'm thrilled to be working with so many nonprofits in all 5 boroughs. What we're doing specifically with the Complete Count Fund, which awarded those nonprofits, is ensuring that every single of our 245 neighborhoods in New York City, which is a metric we created to ensure that census tracts are covered in each neighborhood and everyone can feel their neighborhood. The NOCs that Julie mentioned is neighborhood you live in, your community. Every single nonprofit is in every single of our 245 neighborhoods. And we are providing resources, which I hope Chuck agrees. We're providing resources to ensure that we're giving the talking points, we're talking about how it's safe, we're talking about how it's easy, we're talking about how it's for everyone, and ensuring that nonprofits who are the most trusted messengers, all of you who work at community-based organizations, who work with community-based organizations, know that the staff and volunteers and families that are going to CBOs every day are the ones who know their friends, family, and neighbors the best. So my job working at NYC Census 2020 is to ensure that these nonprofits have what they need to get out the count starting March 12th. So to answer Mita's question specifically, self-response is extremely important. Jeff touched on this and really hit the high notes, but at the end of the day, if you're gonna come to my apartment, I actually have a 2-year-old, so Sophia mentioned a 2-year-old. If you're gonna come to my apartment during the day, maybe no one's gonna answer the door. No one's gonna know that I have a 2-year-old. No one's gonna know that my neighbor has 2 5-year-olds. If we respond ourselves, that's how we can actually account for who's there. People are at work 24 hours a day. People work 2 or 3 shifts. I'm lucky enough to only work 1. But people are not gonna be home all the time, and we don't want the Census Bureau to have to employ all these enumerators. We wanna do it ourselves. We know best who's there, right? I've had friends who work at all kinds of nonprofits and city agencies who've had to live on my couch over the past 15 years. I want to be able to count for them, right? So for me and for NYC Census 2020, we have 32 days till self-response begins on March 12th. We have a countdown on our website. I know the Census Bureau has a countdown going, at least in their heads. Jeff's looking at me like, yes, 31.5 days, Allison. So for us, self-response is the period where all these children can be counted, because we know best who's in our homes. And there's also the fact that not every child is living in a traditional situation, right? As some of you know, I used to work at Children's Services. I had the honor of helping to oversee the child care and Head Start program, and of course worked closely with the child welfare team as well. There are people that are children that are living not with their primary, quote, guardian. They're living with their grandparent. They're living with their aunt. Where are they living on April 1st? That's what matters. So we need to make sure that children are being counted where they are on Census Day. We need to ensure that whether you're living 51% of your time with your father versus your aunt, that whoever has them that day is counting them, that they don't feel that they can't be counted because maybe they're not in a traditional household. And that's really important for children under 5, because we need to make sure the resources are going to every district so that Head Start gets the funding it needs, so your local school gets the funding it needs. It's just, there's so many non-traditional situations that especially impact children under 5, that we need to make sure that if you're responding yourself, if every New Yorker responds themselves, they're the ones who can say exactly where the children in their families and their networks and their communities are and can respond. We want to make sure that in the 2 months before enumeration begins, that we can all do our best. Jeff said it himself. That's what the Census Bureau wants, and that's what we want, because if we don't do it ourselves, we're the ones who know best. And I really just wanted to say, like, you know, I really want to enforce what Sophia said about the next 10 years. What we do this year, March 12th to, in my opinion, through May 14th before enumeration starts, and it's going to continue. People can still keep responding themselves through the entire census. It doesn't stop just because enumeration begins. That's really important. In 2019, that's going to impact where my school district, where my 2-year-old will be 9, right? Or, yeah, 12, 11. I can count. I'm counting so much I can't count myself. But, you know, I just want to make sure we all think about that. And the children under 5 will be children under 12 and under 20 and under 15. And what do they need? So I just really want to share that, you know, what you're hearing from my colleagues, what each of you already knows. We just want to reinforce it. We want to provide you the resources. We want to make sure you know exactly who to talk to, which is everyone.
I promise I'm going to get to you, but I actually have a quick question for Jeff. So sorry. Jeff, Allison was talking about, like, you know, if I don't answer the door, how will you know that I have a 2-year-old or that someone's sleeping on my couch? Can you, like, sort of clarify what happens in that moment? Like, why would some assumptions be made as to who's in the household?
Yeah, so how the enumeration piece of this will work, we'll start knocking on doors May 13th at every address in which we have yet to receive a census response. Now, in some parts of the country, we actually start knocking on April 9th. Those will be in areas outside of college campuses where students typically rent homes or apartments. We want to catch them and count them where they usually live or stay, which is off campus at their college or university before they leave for the semester. But really, for the majority of the nation, May 13th, we're going to start knocking on doors. We will go to a door probably anywhere from 6 to 10 times. So we're going to visit it once, and then we're not going to visit it probably for 4 or 5 days, and we're going to go back, and we'll continue to go back because we want to talk to someone. When we get towards the end of that operation is when we start talking to proxies, start talking to neighbors or a mailman. Can you tell me about who lives there? Do you know their names? Do you know how their approximate ages? The data gets less quality and less quality, you know, if we have to go to that stage. I will mention, every time we visit a household, we leave a little notice reminding them it's not too late to self-respond. Here's your census ID. Here's the URL. Please go online. You know, but it's important as partners to realize that the messaging changes after May 13th. Yes, we still want people to self-respond, but if someone knocks on your door, it's okay to answer, and it's okay to give them the information that they need to ensure your entire family, everyone who lives at that address, gets counted.
So I think the takeaway there is, like, if you don't respond, eventually they'll ask some other person near you about you, and they might not know that you just had a child or that your niece has been living on your couch for the last 6 months. So I always bring up that one because I once had a niece living on my couch for 6 months. But like, Jorge, how do we communicate to communities of color around the importance of counting their children and the importance of the census for their communities?
Hi, Jorge Vasquez, Latino Justice, Pro-Dev. The importance is talking about dollars and cents. Let's talk about New York State gets federal funding for more than 300 programs. Less than 5% of those programs, less than 15 of those programs represent $26,000 per person undercounted annually. Let's say it differently. Less than 5% equals $100,000 for each 4 people. We probably know a neighbor that has 4 people that lives there. As it relates to communities of color, we know that individuals perceive us, especially young populations, at a significantly older age, right? They look at a child and say, that child looks like they're 8 years old. Child is probably 4 years old, right? We could all relate to that. And then when we look at 7% Latinos, 6% African Americans, and we look at our children, it's important that we're able to protect our children. And the best way to protect our children is to make sure that we include them. We know that when schools are under-resourced, our children generally underperform. When children underperform, unfortunately, history says we are going to create a prison bed for them. And we're doing this for the next 10 years. So the way that we need to make sure that we're messaging this is finding out what matters to people, right? The fact that you could help out. Everyone here should be able to help save $100,000. I'm looking around, we have around 50 people here. That's over $5 million we could save just by making sure 4 people who weren't going to participate in the census participate. So that would be my challenge to you all. And talk to people of color, right? We know that we're under surveillance, right? A lot of rhetoric, we see what happened in the news yesterday. This is going to impact our communities greatly. We understand that come March 30th, March 31st, somebody's going to be on Twitter, I don't know who, saying something that's false, right? So the best way to attack that is by being the messenger now and making sure that we're giving out right information. And I think ways to get involved, as Jeff said, you know, apply for census jobs. Let's show the community how we can stick together, how we help one another. What wasn't said, but the city, these community-based organizations that got grants are also hiring people, right? So you have more than enough opportunity to generate revenue while educating your community to ensure that our resources stay where they're most needed.
Can I say something quick?
Yeah, please.
So first on the comment about age, I got the opposite problem. I'm 34, people think I'm 15, so doesn't apply to everybody.
I actually thought it was 14, so thanks. I thought it was 14.
I appreciate it. But yeah, I have to echo what you said about this baseline level of distrust. I think a lot of our communities of color, but also immigrant communities, you know, when we see, white people with clipboards and badges, that's not a good thing, right? They're usually there to take your money or take your freedom or something. So we, as community-based organizations and other people who are interested in making sure we get a complete count, we want to make sure that people self-respond before May 13. We want to, push that URL or push those phone numbers to our communities before someone comes knocking on a door with perhaps an intimidating badge or something else. So, yeah.
Jorge, I'm going to stick with you. If you don't mind. You mentioned the fears that people have and how, what we see almost daily can help exacerbate it. But what do we do to help assuage those fears?
We go through history. We're a resilient community. We've overcome horrors that no one else could imagine. But in particular, if we're talking about immigrant communities who have children, well, almost 10 years ago, we gave the government all of our information and our children's information in applying for DACA. And we see that for the most part, our community has been safe. So let's remind individuals that actually we've been here before. And while the person in office seems to be anti-immigrant, in my organization, and I'm not gonna speak for anyone else's, while I voted for President Obama, he was known in our communities as the deporter-in-chief. We gave the deporter-in-chief our children's information, our information, who lives in our home information without the protections of Title 13 that Jeff just talked about. So let's not be scared of giving information. Let's use that to our benefit and say, this is why they don't want us to use this information, right? This is why, they're sending out these messaging. And I think when you're dealing with minority communities that are used to being back against the wall, letting them know that we're in this together. So this is an opportunity for people of different races to communicate with one another, as was echoed, but also to remind them that, listen, the best way to protect our community, self-response, but just make sure you respond.
Chuck, do you have anything to add to that?
I think he said it really eloquently. That's exactly right. Just make sure you respond. I didn't think about that DACA point, but that's a really great point. We've already exposed ourselves and our children without these very strong legal protections that exist for the census. So that's an excellent point. We're almost already doubled down on this thing. We're committed to this. Our information's in the system, and so we might as well get something in return.
Allison, what are the get out the count priorities for sort of the 3 stages, right? Like now until the actual questionnaires arrive, and then the self-response period, and then the so the lingo for the period after that is NRFU, because that's really cool. The non-response follow-up period.
It's the coolest. We really like acronyms. NRFU, GOTC, CCF, keeps going. But thank you. Yes, so right now it's the before, education and outreach. For instance, we have Teach-In Tuesday, this coming Tuesday. Some of you are awardees and are part of that. I see Baji, Daycare Council, a lot of groups in the room are gonna be helping us out on Tuesday with getting people to turn out. We have more than 50 events happening in all 5 boroughs in the history of the social justice movement, teach-ins, civil rights movement. We are teaching in. We need to teach one another about how to talk about the census, how to recruit our neighbors, our friends, and our family members. This is not a top-down. This is grassroots. And I just want to say, to jump on to the question before that Chuck just answered, in addition to others, we need to make sure people know it's safe, right? And we need to make sure that people know that it's safe because they're hearing from trusted messengers. That's the entire point of the Complete Count Fund and the nonprofits we're working with, is that if I'm gonna go out to all 5 boroughs myself and talk to people and they don't know me, and maybe I don't speak the language they speak, maybe they don't necessarily wanna hear from me. They wanna hear from those people that are actually on the ground that they're working with, whether it's outreach coordinators and outward staffers that our awardees are hiring, that are living in NYCHA developments and know their neighbors best, or whether it's the caseworkers they're working with every week, whether it's the teachers in their ESL classes, whether it's the staff at their Head Start program. That's who matters. So I just wanted to reinforce that. But so before, we're doing education, outreach. During, we're gonna be encouraging folks to do pop-up centers, having the one-on-one conversations with their clients and membership. And then, quote, after is that, 1, self-response will continue. We're gonna continue with phone calls and one-on-one texting and talking to our clients and our memberships, talking to all New Yorkers through the Knox with volunteers going door to door. We're not stopping, we're gonna keep going. And we're gonna just keep out getting the count. And could I talk a little bit about what we're doing across different agencies, because that came up earlier in the Q&A. I think it's really important. My colleague Daniela is taking a really nice picture right now. But I wanna give her a shout out because she's working with DOE really closely, and we're also having meetings with ACS and all other city agencies, really prioritizing NYCHA, MOYA, the agencies that we work with closest to ensure that they, who have the biggest reach in the city, are reaching their clients, right? And with DOE, for instance, we just had a meeting with pre-K outreach team yesterday. There's a huge push. The application period just opened for pre-K. I just want to shout out. How do we make sure that every parent who's thinking about pre-K for their 4-year-old knows that the census is coming? Let's just talk about it. Let's put a little blurb on the website. Let's make sure people know, no matter where people are, no matter what they're doing. So, and with DOE, Early Learn, the low-income childcare and Head Start program moved over there officially last summer from ACS. Someone mentioned ACS and childcare. There's still childcare providers that are working through ACS, but yes. And I know, hi. But a lot of them are DOE now too, and we're making sure that we're coordinating with the policy councils at the Head Start programs, that we're working with the unions, we're working with the UFT, with the family child care providers, we're working with DC 37 to make sure that all those staffers at the Head Start and child care programs are getting out the word. We're working with media. Julie spoke about our local media and ethnic campaign, media outlet campaign. Our field teams in every neighborhood in New York City, our citywide partners, including NIAC and others in the room, are out there helping us do trainings and ensuring that people are working together. And that's a lot of what's happening in this education outreach period. Come to a training, come to a teach-in. I can't stop saying teach-ins. They're happening Tuesday. And then also, you know, I want to highlight for a second, daycare council, is that okay? They're in the room. I've had a long experience working with this wonderful organization. They're one of our awardees, and I think a really great example, specifically when you're talking about children under 5, is how do we speak to parents and families exactly where they are every single day? At their daycare center, right? So, you know, I think a really great example of work that we can do at the child care centers in the city is the fact that Daycare Council is going to be providing child care services while parents can complete the census. Right? Yes. Like, all of our child care centers should be doing that. Whether it's at their policy council meetings, whether it's at an event they're having at, you know, they have parent-teacher meetings too, not just the K-12. Like, that's, to me, it's something that's so genius and easy that all of us that are working in multi-service organizations at CBOs that have programs for children from 0 to 24 and beyond should be doing that. I just really wanted to highlight that. And I just took up a lot of time, I'm sorry. I'm very excited.
We're going to be speaking on the panel for about like 8 to 10 more minutes, and then we'll be taking questions. The questions will be on the form of index cards. So if you have questions, please start, you know, filling out your cards. Yeah, we've got people here. Bijan, hi. And he will collect the cards with your questions, and we will be taking questions that way. So, Sophia, I wanted to delve a bit into, we heard a bit about what we're doing to reach children, and I'd like to hear a bit more about that, but I also would like to understand, you know, which children are being undercounted? You know, what is the intersectionality, to borrow that phrase, around that?
Hello, okay. So, you know, as many of you may know, CCC has started our own campaign around the undercount of young children on the census, and the goal is really to, you know, expand the pool of trusted messengers. I know you keep hearing this term, you know, folks who are on the ground talking to families every day, families that might be hard to count or hesitant or uninformed about filling out the census. And we are working through libraries, through borough presidents, and, you know, through community-based organizations, as well as really working with young people to talk about the importance of the census. And, you know, to kind of pivot into the second question, a lot of different children are missed, right? So we spoke about, you know, young children of color being missed at much higher rates than children at large. Children in immigrant families are also much more likely to be missed. And this is, you know, a pivotal place to kind of utilize the role of young people. I know a lot of folks in here might be after-school providers, might be educators for young folks. And we really know that young people play such an important role in their homes, right? Acting as a translator in a lot of ways to their families and their, you know, parents, really, trying to translate complex forms as well as, you know, informing them about what's best. And so we look at the census as an opportunity to utilize young people and mobilize them to speak with their own families and in their communities, because they're also very powerful advocates, as we all know. Another few characteristics that have been proven to make children harder to count is children who live in big cities, right? Children who are living in renter-dominated cities, all things which New York is. And kind of a fun fact that I'd like to share, and it might not be so fun for not everybody who's super data-oriented, but it is interesting to share that basically the undercount of young children, right, is concentrated, 77% is concentrated in only about 200 counties that have 500,000 people or more. You know that in New York City, all the counties have 500,000 people or more. So we have a battle ahead, but we know the risk factors and we have, you know, the resources as well.
Could you, question to Jeff, I realize my mic turned on halfway. Could you tell us a bit about what resources are available? You talked a bit about that before, but maybe a bit about statistics in schools, and which I know is K through 12, but how it can be expanded, and other resources that are available to people who want to activate.
Yeah, absolutely. And before I jump into the resources, I want to mention something regarding the undercount. So we do a coverage measurement survey, almost on parallel with the census. It's like a mini census, but in much greater detail. We do a lot of person interviewing. We create our own address lists in various areas. And the reason we do that is to measure the undercount. That's how we learn that communities of color are typically undercounted. What we learned about children under the age of 5, and I'm a glass half full guy, so I look at this as a positive thing. The majority of children that were not counted in 2010 come from households in which the form was completed. All right, the parents are filling out the form, they're just not including their kids. And that we can tackle that issue. I mean, our messaging is, we have the tools. Every one of us on this stage today have toolkits available, and they're wonderful resources. I'll talk a little bit, and there's Jolie. I was talking about her earlier. This is the person you have to get to know, please. She has access to a lot of these materials. If you see some things online that, hey, I could use 200 of these brochures to put on a waiting room table in a clinic that I serve in or in a school, let us know. We'll get you that information so you can share the messaging. But again, there's so many different tools out there, and what we ask our partners to do is create your toolbox, create your toolkit of what works well for your communities. And you can pull something from every one of us. And then you take that toolkit to your community members to figure out what is the right message, who is the right messenger. We have a great program called Statistics in Schools. It is K through 12, but it's activities that a teacher can download. And when we think about counting young children, yes, they may have siblings that are school age. I had in a meeting previously, the parents told me they learned how to recycle the right way from their student, from their child who learned in school. We need to teach our kids about the census, how important it is, how safe it is, and what it means for the next 10 years. And the Statistics in School program does that. We also have, I was just excited we have this this is the Spanish version, a great coloring book on our website. Now, we haven't got a lot of these in. I would love to hand one out to everyone. We just got 5 in today. But this is available to be downloaded and printed out on our website, 2020census.gov. Again, think of it as a toolkit. Pull out the tools that work well for you. That we have some great tools that talk very specifically about situations in which young children are in, whether it's a split household. I spend 50% of my time with my mom, the other 50% with my dad. Where should I be counted? We try to spell that out in very generic examples that you can use to share with parents who may have children in that situation. Same way with grandparents who may be raising their grandkids because their parents aren't around. A lot of different situations, but check out what we all have to offer because there's some great tools out there.
Can I make a quick plug for the Census Bureau's PSAs just released a few weeks ago in various languages? 30 seconds, brief, so for people who are always glued to their screens, it's easy to consume, kind of passively. But I saw the one in Korean, there's one in Mandarin, Cantonese, Japanese, Spanish, they're multiple. And it's always, the video, the setup is a kid talking to their parent or their grandparent explaining the census in, a setting that's familiar to that specific ethnic group or that culture. And I've found that people love sharing that, in our social media or kind of giving to my parents. They love sharing with their friends because in their language, it's a familiar setting. So quick plug for those videos.
And I'll actually plug New York Counts 2020 briefly here. We are relaunching our website on Tuesday, and we will make resources easier to find. It'll be more navigable, and it will have discussion forums where you can ask questions and the communities can participate. So that will be another site coming soon. So I'm going to do the final round of questions here, and it's going to be the same question for everyone, which is, if you had to make sure the audience left with one piece of information or one call to action, what would it be? So we'll just go straight down the line.
It would be Jolie Golden's phone number and her email address. No, it would be to have that conversation, whether it's at your place of employment, your place of worship, your favorite restaurant with family and friends, that the census is safe, that it's easy, and that the next 10 years are the importance, and all of the programs that come to your neighborhoods, your communities, will be based upon a complete and accurate census.
Make the final, call to action and to say that you are all the, our bridge to the people who are most impacted by this undercount, by the potential undercount, right? There's no one better in this room to talk to the people that you know other than you. You came here today, you care about the issue, and there's nobody more positioned than you here today. There's roles that everybody can play. You are absolutely an opportunity for someone to learn or to not learn about the census.
Yeah, I'm gonna piggyback off that. I mean, every single one of you, I don't know how much of this has kind of punched through your attention and you've absorbed, but just approach one or two people today and tell them about this training you attended this morning, whether you thought it was boring, whether you thought it was great, and just say, hey, I heard about the census. Here's one or two things I kind of remember. Let's talk about it. And take 2 minutes to do that, in conversation. I think even that would help.
I have 2 catchphrases for you. The first one, everyone counts, especially children, and 10 minutes, 10 questions, the next 10 years.
You have more information than anyone else. You are already an expert for all intents and purposes as it relates to the census. Half of the people that are going to receive the census still think that there's going to be a citizenship question on there. So you start off with more information, right? So I leave you with over $26,000 for 10 years for each person undercounted. So you have the ability to save $100,000 of funding just by getting 4 people to participate in it. And that could just be one household, right? Or that could be 4 different neighbors. But each one teach one, right? And to whom much is given, much is expected. We just gave you a whole bunch of information, and we expect that you're gonna at least share it with someone who's not here.
Thank you. So we've got some questions from the audience. I've grouped them and sort of paraphrased some of them, but for Sophia, we all keep talking about children being undercounted. Do we have a sense of why? Like what leads to that?
Yeah, we have a sense. There's not one reason why children are undercounted on the census. We spoke about a bunch of different things today already, right? Fears that people might have. Jeff mentioned, and I believe the statistic is, if I could find it on this sheet with a bunch of other statistics, whatever. Some children, right, are not included on the census form because they don't get a census form sent to their house. But more children are left off the form because their parents, their caregivers, their grandparents, their guardians didn't put them on the form. Right? And that is, in a lot of cases, a problem of misinformation, of being uninformed, right? And things that we absolutely, in this room, have the collective knowledge to overcome. I also just, want to say that to the degree that families can be, reached and we can talk to people and make these important connections about the census is the degree that we'll be able to overcome the undercount. And, when children are uncounted, again, their needs are invisible, right? The government just doesn't know that they're there. Maybe that child, that parent never had a teacher who, their daughter's teacher drove home that importance of the census to them. And back to that 62% response rate, when people don't respond to their form, it becomes less and less accurate. So for those reasons, we gotta overcome that.
Pivoting off the misinformation, but in a different way, there will be some scams run. Some already have been run. And this is for anyone, primarily Jeff, but I think we can all address it. Is what is being done and will be done to deal with mis and disinformation?
So at the federal level, I can tell you the Census Bureau, we have a rumors and scams webpage. It's live. Again, everything you can access via 2020census.gov. There was a rumor going around that there were people from the Department of Home Affairs knocking on doors. There is no Department of Home Affairs, right? It turns out this was a scam that started overseas via social media, and someone picked it up in New York City, and we actually got a call and say, hey, we're hearing this complaint that's, the Department of Home Affairs is knocking on doors, and we're able to remedy that. So we have a rumors page where we're addressing issues as we learn them. The best thing to do, if you have questions, reach out to us. Let us know if something doesn't sound right or something doesn't seem right. We'll do the research, and then we'll make sure we get it on our webpage so everyone can see the answer. There have been scams already that started last year, both in Washington State and in Connecticut. A political party sent out their flyer, their annual survey asking about how people felt on gun violence and this and that. At the bottom, send your check for $25 in. Well, last year, the organization decided to put in capital letters, bold, across the front of their interview form, census. And people thought that was the census. So you know what's on the census. You know that we don't ask for money or for social security numbers or bank or credit card information. So we need you to share that information. Yes, it's available on our website, but it's more powerful when it's coming from all of you, when they're hearing it directly from you. They come to you for education, they come to you for validation. And you have the ability, you have the tools now to share that message with them.
If I could just add back to Mita's question and piggybacking off of Jeff, a study showed that a lot of adults will actually complete their census form. A study done by the Partnership for America's Children, which is specifically done for parents of young children, found that 10% of families would leave their own children off the form, and 8% were unsure or not of whether to count them, right? And going back to this uncertainty, this misinformation, and something that we know, which is that children are much more likely to be missed when somebody filling out the form isn't their biological or adoptive parent. So this is grandparent households and all these other complex households that we know exist in this room and in New York broadly. So because people are so unsure about leaving children on the form, right? That might be 18% of people who didn't keep their kids on the form. It's easy to understand how every adult might be counted in a community while every child is not, right? And then when we are using those data for, planning and future purposes, children, the percentage of the population that are children is not accurately represented, and those needs aren't prioritized relative.
I do want to add that there will be hotlines, NALEO, MALDEF, Arab American Institute Leadership Conference, all will have hotlines available to report. It's also to ask questions, but to report anything nefarious, and they will be actively, collating data and sharing it nationally. So I'm sure those hotlines can be made available to people. They're not all live yet, but they're all taking voicemails.
Could I add to that really
Yeah.
briefly? So something that we're doing at NYC Census 2020 is a rapid response, which our citywide partners, including NYIC, are helping us with, that when we hear something and we want to make sure that everyone knows about it, we're automatically signed up, everyone who's getting our newsletter we send out weekly. I know Abney has a weekly one, et cetera. Anyone who wants to be on a rapid response, let me know, or email the nice email address that was on your table, your chairs. We can add you to our rapid response. For instance, last week with the Supreme Court decision about public charge, we sent out a rapid response thing to information from Moya to all of our nonprofit awardees, to all of our partners who get our communications every day, to ensure that people knew how to respond. So not necessarily about scams, but about what's out there. Like Jorge mentioned, people are gonna start going on there and saying, oh, ICE is going to be out in Bushwick on this date, and then no one's gonna let anyone take their census information, right? And we wanna make sure that we're all working together to stop that misinformation, to let people know this is safe, it's for everyone, that's not happening, don't talk to those people, talk to the person with the sticker, or talk to the person from the Census Bureau, et cetera. So we need to all work in this together.
Chuck, can you talk a bit about efforts to address language barriers in our communities? And I think Jose can also talk to us about that.
Yeah, so
Javier, what's going on with my head? Yeah.
so
Jorge, no wonder. I see him every third day, so I don't know what's going on. Yeah.
So really quickly, I think something that's great is that the website, the web form, once it goes live, will be available in 12 languages other than English, right? And as well as I think there will be phone lines to phone in the census and respond that way in 12 languages other than English. Their guides are in 59 languages.
59 language guides.
Language guides, but actually responding you can do in 12 languages other than English. I think there are some gaps though, and that's where we're focusing a lot of our attention as CBOs, as the Minkwin Center, as well as other Asian American, Asian Pacific Islander American groups. For example, a lot of South Asian languages aren't captured in that web form, so we have a lot of Bengali speakers, Hindi speakers, Urdu speakers, and readers. And when they go onto that live self-response form, they won't see their language available. And so what we're doing is we can't create the website and create a census, self-response website in their language. We can at least create a lot of materials and additional guides in their languages, whether it's flyers and posters, to get out the word about the census. And what we're doing is we're taking the great, helpful how to respond videos that already exist. There's a great video walkthrough of the web form that will go live. That's available online now on YouTube. We're taking those videos and then having our Bengali speakers narrate over those videos and explain to their communities, at restaurants or in other settings, hey, this is what the form will look like. I know you don't know might not be able to read what it says, but this is what you put in this field, this is what you put in that field. And so we're trying to demystify the process, desensitize people to what the form will look like, and particularly looking at these South Asian communities, which won't have the form available in their language.
And if I could just briefly add, that video that you talked about will be available in all 59 languages. We have a printed language guide now in 59 languages. That video will also be made available in those same 59 languages.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah, so Latino Justice, one thing that we're doing is we're doing telethons live with broadcasters. So far we've partnered with NBC Telemundo to do during evening hour news, just a hotline. Call us, we'll answer your basic census questions. On average, we get 500 calls per hour, right? So people are interested in knowing basic things. And so far, we've done it 4 different days. So that's, if you do it per hour and we do it for about 2 hours, we've reached about 5,000 people so far. But there's simple things like that that make the world of a difference, and you'll be amazed. People just have basic questions, right? We're all lawyers. We're here. We're ready to talk about Title 13. We're ready to talk about the precedents, meaning like how it hasn't been breached. But people just want to know what's on there. Is my information okay? Yes or no? Okay, I don't have to give a credit card? No. I'm traveling. I'm traveling April. I'm not going to be here. How can I fill it out? I don't get the number or I don't get the mail. What do I do? It's very basic things. And I think the questions that we're receiving, and after troubleshooting about 5,000 calls, I'm a little familiar with what we should expect. And I think it's just basic stuff, right? No, there's not a citizenship question. Oh, great, right? Yes, your information is protected. Amazing. And that's it. Okay, goodbye, thank you. I'm going to fill it out.
So we're just going to do one last question. Everyone else who submitted questions, an FAQ will be distributed post this event to answer the other questions. So Jeff, just to recap, how long is the self-reporting timeline, and are there any public campaigns, and maybe Allison can speak to this too, around children in foster care and how to count them?
So for self-response, it will start March 12th. That's when you can go online. That's when you can call the toll-free telephone number. If you receive a questionnaire in the mail in your first mailing, you can fill it out and return that, okay? Every household that wants to fill it out on paper will get that opportunity. It just may not come in that first packet we send you starting March 12th. It may come in our 4th mail out to you, which begins April 8th. Self-response continues through the end of July. That's when census activities stop, okay? So self-response is up from March 12th through the end of July. We'll start knocking on doors May 13th, and that will continue through the end of July. So that's really the time period to be counted.
And any campaigns around counting children in foster care?
Right. So I mentioned that we're working closely with a variety of city agencies, including Children's Services. We've had meetings with ACS and specifically with the Family Permanency Services, which is foster care, and we're going to be working closely. There's different kinds. So there's foster care where you are fostering, whether it's kinship or a child that you've chosen, that is you're fostering with, or there's group homes. So the group homes is going to be similar, that we're working with some of these enumeration methods for not just homeless shelters, but also these group homes for foster care. And then in terms of children that you might be fostering in your home, we're going to ensure that ACS is able to communicate with all foster parents to let them know exactly what to do, how to do it, who's there April 1st. So yes, we are closely coordinating with not just ACS, but a variety of agencies to address specific populations such as that.
Applause for our great panel.